In this section, we're going to talk about corruption and the Sarbanes-Oxley bill in the United States, or Bill C-198 here in Canada. There is a link on the e-class for you to see the YouTube video called The Story of the Dove, or Black Money. And it's a movie that was put together by PBS. It was a 1.5 hour special. And all you really need to watch in the link is the first 10 or 12 minutes of it, so you get an idea of what the story is. I'll give you a little summary here, but if you watch the YouTube, I think you'll kind of get a more dramatic presentation. Bottom line, Saudi Arabia agrees to pay $80 billion for military planes with oil, and they buy these through a British company called British Aerospace, BAE. So they're going to pay for the planes in oil. The CEO of BAE, the British company, comes to America on a business trip. He's a humongous company, public company, and he's arrested by the FBI the minute he gets off the plane and enters the USA. Why? Because he's being subpoenaed before a judicial committee for bribery payments to the Saudi royal family through a deal maker, through a third party named Bandar bin Sultan. Now, right away, you got to ask yourself, why would the FBI arrest a CEO of a Fortune 500 company that's not even an American company? It's a British company. Now, let's just get a little bit more of the story in. The contract created thousands of long-term jobs and revenue for the British government, and indirectly for the American government, who were subcontractors on many of the parts. Now, the planes were paid for, as I said, with oil. And the way that was done is that the value of the oil was pegged at the beginning of the contract, well below the market value, so that as the oil was exported and sold by BAE, there was a difference between what they took to pay for the planes and what they actually got for the oil. And that little amount of money, which was in the hundreds of millions, was a slush fund that was used to pay for the lavish lifestyle of several members of the Saudi royal family. Now, how does this happen? How does a public company sell oil to pay for the planes and have a slush fund? Where's the accounting? What's going on here? They're violating the basic accounting rules that are in every single country. Every expense has to be recorded and every revenue has to be recorded. Here you have a whole pile of money that's not recorded. How are you guys getting away with that? Now, that's illegal. That's fraud, because you are clearly cheating the owners, the shareholders of BAE, because there's revenue that's being diverted. Now, if you're diverting revenue for the Saudi family in this project, how many other places are you diverting revenue for your own private projects? Nobody knows. That's why it's, of course, illegal. Now, the oil was sold for cash. As I said, an agreed portion was transferred to BAE to pay for the planes, and the rest was transferred to these members of the Saudi family. This was against the law. And the reason that the FBI focused in on this is because in 1977 they passed a law against bribery. It's called the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. And it made this particular manner of doing business illegal. Because, of course, what happens is you create a channel and a path for money that cannot be traced. Now, why was it made illegal? I could tell you it's not for me as an investor or any of you. It was made illegal because the major investors of the world, the billionaire investors, recognized that by playing this game, funds could be diverted from the company into the private bank accounts of the directors or the executives of the company, because there was a way for them to escape the disclosure that was required here. And that was a big problem. That's what led to Enron collapsing and creating billions of dollars of debt, and WorldCom and all the other tragedies of the late 1900s, the late 1990s. So that's why this was an issue, because they had to try to enforce these rules to protect the major investors, the billionaires, the Warren Buffetts, the Bill Gates, the Saudi family who had heavy involvement in the stock market. All of them had to be protected, and in this case, really funny that you're kind of protecting yourself against yourself. Corruption in its simplest form is using, in this case, public office for public gain. And it might be old, and it might be, what happens when you're in public office. But the danger to the market is greater than the potential gain and power that it gives the individual person. And we have to recognize it. That's why Sarbanes-Oxley, or Bill C-198 for the Canadians, came into existence. It makes the directors of the company or the charity personally liable for any of these games that they choose to play that diverts funds that legitimately belong to the charity or the company, i.e. the shareholders, to other projects, let's call them. Now, of course, we have to understand, and we covered this earlier, corruption is based on human greed. And everybody understands that there's no line where a person who's greedy says, well, that's enough greed. The whole basic definition of greed is that there is no end to what I'm willing to take as long as I get away with it. Conrad Black spent years in jail for defrauding his own company because there's no end. There's no end, and it's hard to sit back, especially when it's your own company, and say, well, I'm not going to take that because it's not legit. These are very difficult issues, but the integrity of our financial system is dependent on the fact that we have a rule of law that protects all shareholders from this type of behavior. Now, I'm not saying that we have solved the problems with corruption. I think they did a study, I'm sorry I can't remember the source, where out of 200 companies, 1 in 10 could say they were reasonably clean. The others all had issues with corruption. So we understand it's a problem. And that's why these laws are being passed. And you, as the future managers, you will have to deal with these laws. So, for example, if you're in a company and the owner of the company wants to pay for their trip to Disney World through a company check, and you're in the accounting department and they ask you to do the check, you have a problem, because by you doing the check, he's breaking the law by using the funds for something that has nothing to do with the company. You're breaking the law by issuing the check for something that has nothing to do with the company, and you were in a position of responsibility. And depending where you are, this could be very severe for your career, and it's important for you to understand that. That has been an underlying theme of everything that we've spoken about in this particular course, is that there are laws protecting ethical behavior, in fact, demanding ethical behavior. So I hope that that will help you understand the whole concept of corruption, how it is now reflected in Sarbanes-Oxley and Bill C-198. These are new laws that have come into existence since 2005. So your historical picture may, of course, tell you a different story where all this corruption seemed to work and it was okay and yada yada. But that's not the story now, and it's important for you to know that the new rules and the new expectations are that you will conduct yourself in an ethical manner as a manager or be personally liable. I'll just leave you with one little story where which involves a charity that I was aware of, where the bookkeeper, in order to pay the bills of the charity, neglected to pay the withholding taxes for the employees. Then they had a school in this charity, so they had a number of teachers there, and got away with it until the auditor found out about 10 months later. So it turns out there was a bill of $120,000 that had not been paid to CRA. Of course, the auditor told the directors, who were 5 accountants, that they had to disclose this. They disclosed it to CRA, and CRA said, thanks, you owe us the 120 plus another 30 as penalty, 150,000. Now the charity didn't have the money. So the director said, okay, we'll pay you guys out over the next 5 years. And CRA said, no, you won't. You have 10 days to pay the bill, or we will individually seize the assets of each of the 5 of you. And so they had 10 days to each come up with $30,000 apiece and pay off. And if one of them could not have come up with the 30,000, then the others would have had to have made it up. So it's not a joke. It's very serious. Here's 5 guys who worked as a board of directors, got no compensation. It was a kindness that they did for the community to manage this, and here they get caught in the middle of this fiasco, and now they're having to go into their own lines of credit or bank accounts, whatever they had to do, in order to pay off the debt. Before Bill C-198, they never would have been held liable. So that's why I'm explaining to you how important it is. And that's the end of this session.